Svetlana was born into a special family, one that the residents of the small town spoke of with admiration, sometimes with humor, but always with respect. In a town that was once very small, the Rostovs came from faraway lands, perhaps from the magnificent city of St. Petersburg itself. The men of the Rostov clan always appeared strong and muscular. As if they could fell a tree with a swing of their shoulders, the women of the family stood out for their delicate beauty, mixed with a healthy vitality. The townspeople often called them noble blood. Since childhood, Svetlana had heard many legends about her great-grandmother Zinaida. From an old photograph pasted on a piece of cardboard, taken long before the revolution, emerged the image of a beautiful woman with bright gray eyes, looking through the mists of time and faded paper. She wore a formal high-neck dress. Her long hair was skillfully braided and arranged around her head in an intricate crown-like hairstyle. The woman in the photo was so beautiful that one could feel that she was a legendary figure, a ghost from the past. With a gentle smile revealing her full lips and a graceful gesture as her dark gloved hand gently touched her cheek, she seemed to be looking back across the decades to ask her descendants, "How are you living? Have you preserved anything of our heritage?" In the photo, standing next to her, is a handsome young man, broad-shouldered, dark-haired, wearing a classic suit, with a tight tie and a university badge pinned to his lapel. It is Nikolai Rostov, who came from the capital at the end of the 19th century to heal the people and brought his beautiful wife with him. Every time Svetlana holds this piece of cardboard, her heart always stops beating. This heavy piece of paper carries a strange scent that has faded with time and the photographer's scribbled signature. She felt as if she were looking into a bygone era, to see once more the incredible beauty of her distant relatives, to see her great-grandmother Olga, the couple's eldest daughter, in the photograph. Of course, when Svetlana was born and grew up, Olga was already over 70. But even at that age, through the wrinkles, one could still see her delicate features, high cheekbones, and beautiful eyes that had never lost their deep, pearly light. Olga also had several photographs taken in the 1920s, where she stood proudly, her chin held high and her chest puffed out. Even the white stockings she tried to wear under her shoes, the ridiculous striped blouse with laces, and the boyish bob could not detract from her elegance. The war had swept through their family like a terrible mill. Olga's husband, 2 sons, and 3 brothers had died on the battlefield, almost the entire Rostov clan. Olga had only memories of her previous life, old photographs carefully kept in a hat box of her mother, and the unborn child she had learned of a few weeks after her husband had left her. Olga's youngest daughter, Antonina, was born just after the war and became the next in line to inherit those pearly gray eyes and high cheekbones. Svetlana's grandmother, with her kohl-rimmed eyes and babette hairdo, shone brightly. The radiance even somewhat obscured her natural beauty, which only became more apparent in her old age. Svetlana's grandmother, after becoming a school teacher, changed her style to a more calm and professional one. The noble and refined beauty of ancient bronze gradually appeared on her face through the patina. After her marriage, she gave birth to a daughter named Svetlana, and once again, the secret mechanism of the Rostov family, activated many generations ago by her great-grandmother Zinaida Rostov, continued to work. Although Irina's husband had fiery red hair and a freckled face, Irina gave birth to a daughter who was exactly like her mother, with gray eyes, smooth skin, and thick black hair. Irina's husband often joked, shaking his head and swearing that he was definitely a redhead when he was a child. Irina just smiled sarcastically and replied with gentle humor, "It seems that beauty never lacks in this family. Svetlana, since kindergarten, has shown herself to be an active, independent, and outspoken girl. She is fearless, and often comes home with torn clothes after playing in the street." Another hole, her mother shook her head when she saw her daughter's clothes. "It's okay, she'll understand when she grows up," her father replied. But even as she grew up, Svetlana retained her lively and active personality. She was always involved, if not as an organizer, Then as a member of almost all school events, formal or informal, Svetlana also played on the school volleyball team, of course, as captain. Most importantly, she lived a cheerful, vibrant life, absorbing everything around her with enthusiasm. Occasionally, Svetlana's strong personality led to trouble. "Svetlana," her mother said wearily, "what did you do again? Why did you hit your classmates and in front of the teacher? Are you crazy? Aren't you ashamed that I was called to school for fighting you, no, Mom?" Svetlana quickly replied, "I'm not ashamed, but if anything, it's because you were called to school, not because of that idiot's parents. I hit him for good reason. Next time I'll do it even harder next time." Irina raised her hand angrily. "You mean you're going to do it again?" "Yes," Svetlana said defiantly, but then she lowered her eyes and added, "Embarrassed, but you understand. He's a coward, a bad guy. He tried to make me angry in chemistry class. I hit him for good reason, and if I had to, I would do it again. You don't know, he keeps spreading rumors everywhere, and then hurting people. I asked him very politely to stop, but he doesn't understand gentle words. So I had to repeat the request in a way he could understand. But what will that do to my brother?" Irina asked, pointing to the 12-year-old Igor, with fiery red hair and a face full of freckles like his father, who was standing nearby with admiring eyes on his sister. "Mom," he interjected, "everyone hates that Shura, and Svetka did the right thing by hitting him." "You're making a bad impression," Irina frowned and gave her final, most serious argument. "Svetlana, you shouldn't have done that. You're a girl, and a very pretty girl, moreover." Svetlana's father's voice rang out as he entered, clearly only hearing the last sentence, "What's the matter?" He gently touched his daughter's shoulder and gently pulled his wife closer. "Our beautiful daughter just got into a fight," Svetlana's mother said sadly. "If it was just a fight, it would be fine," Svetlana laughed. "But I gave him a good smack on the neck to make him keep his mouth shut." "So you fought for what was right," her father smiled, unable to hide his pride as he looked at his daughter Svetlana Vershanina, tall, slender, head held high. Now, not yet 16, Svetlana was already a sight to behold. The Rostov family's beautiful features were evident in her face, large gray eyes, not the dull, empty gray some might think, but a gray that seemed to be covered with pearls. A slightly elongated face with high cheekbones, a delicate nose, full lips, smooth skin, and thick, shiny black hair, all of these were present in Svetlana. She resembled her great-grandmother Zinaida, as she appeared in the old portrait, carefully preserved in the family album. Yet, unlike the coldness that the beauty in the ancient dress exuded, Svetlana's face was always bright and friendly, her sincere smile just like her father's Vlagorna, to illuminate everything around her. "Yes, father, I did the right thing," Svetlana affirmed. "Very well," her father replied with a smile. "Alexei," her mother exclaimed indignantly. "What's the matter, Irina?" "If Svetka says it's necessary, then it's probably true," he continued, but then said to his daughter, however, "Next time you might not have to handle everything yourself." "Oh, of course not," her mother finally became completely exasperated. "All we're missing is organizing fights. Do you both understand?" She waved her hand helplessly and said, "Well, let's go to dinner." At school, Svetlana was respected, sometimes feared, sometimes hated, and many secretly desired her attention. In general, people had different feelings about her, but no one could remain indifferent to Svetlana's presence. That day, after a string of non-stop classes, Svetlana was late for practice and decided to take a shortcut through the parking lot, a large area between the apartment buildings and the school. The place was a veritable paradise for the local kids, especially the boys, a perfect place to play and do their secret business. Adults would chase the kids away from the parking lot by any means possible, but it was as futile as trying to scoop water with a basket. Although she didn't often participate in the activities of the parking lot, Svetlana knew the place well and, when necessary, confidently cut her way through the metal and brick walls. As she rounded a corner, she heard suspicious sounds and stopped. The sound came from just behind the corner. "Okay," she heard a familiar voice. "We have a control system here, understand? We'll let you through. But first, you have to follow our rules," a sly guy hiding behind the wall laughed. and that obnoxious laugh was joined by two others. Svetlana immediately understood the situation. A black-haired boy, about her age or a little older, was backed up against the garage wall, clutching his shirt, which was partially torn at the sleeve. A few steps away from him, three boys from Svetlana's school stood in a semicircle, blocking any escape route for the victim. In the center was a large 10th grader named Victor, who was known as a local bully and troublemaker, with a lopsided grin on his face. "Now you'll hand over your backpack. We'll quickly check what's inside," he announced. "But that's unlikely," a female voice sneered from behind him. Victor started and turned his head. Recognizing Svetlana and knowing her reputation, the previously confident and arrogant boy suddenly felt nervous and somewhat withdrawn. "Vershenina, go away." "There's a man's talk here," he said, but his eyes furtively glanced at his companions for support. Victor frowned again, trying to maintain his composure. "A man's talk," he mimicked, but Svetlana smiled faintly and asked, "A man's talk? What are you doing here? What do you have to do with men? And what kind of talk is it, 3 against 1? Is that how men behave?" "I warn you for the last time, Svetka, go away," the leader of the small group almost begged. But when they saw Svetlana take off her backpack and stare curiously at them, they looked at each other hesitantly. After all, she was just a girl, tall, strong, and athletic, but still a girl and all alone. While there were 3 of them, it made them feel ashamed and scared of their hesitation. It was unclear what would have happened if the black-haired boy in the torn shirt, whom everyone seemed to have forgotten, had not suddenly appeared next to Svetlana, standing shoulder to shoulder with her. The boy firmly pushed his hair out of his face, clenched his fists, and looked as clenched, right into the faces of those who had offended him. "The balance is now," one of the men standing behind Victor whispered. "Let's leave. You know, Vintre. Getting involved with her will only hurt you. And you here. There's clearly someone in that garage." Victor was uncertain. He turned his head, trying to calculate whether retreating would have a negative impact on his reputation. Get out of here," Svetlana added, sensing his hesitation. "You know, we're in the same school, and I don't need accomplices to deal with you. You know that." Victor, clearly deciding that this wasn't worth pursuing, grimaced in disgust, spat on the ground, and muttered, "Okay, live your life happily. As for you, Vershenina, I'll settle the score later." He waved his hand and walked slowly away with his friends. "You coward," Svetlana said contemptuously, then remembered that she was late for practice, quickly picked up her backpack, and ran. "Thanks," she heard a small voice say. She stopped and turned to look at the boy. Honestly, she had almost forgotten about him. She realized now that this boy was much older than her. At least 2 grades, maybe more. "Thank you so much. You saved me," the boy said, then looked at Svetlana intently. "You're brave, especially for a girl." Oh, what courage! Svetlana suddenly felt embarrassed, a feeling she was not used to. To whom? To those guys? They are cowards. The whole neighborhood knows that. They attacked you just because you are not a local. There is really nothing to say. How can there be nothing? There is so much to say. I don't even know what would have happened to me if it weren't for you. Honestly, I am a little scared. It is not easy to face 3 people. To be honest, I have never been good at fighting." The boy smiled. Svetlana loved the way the boy frankly admitted his weakness, without hiding or making excuses. "And one more thing," the boy continued, "I really wanted to tell you, Svetlana. You are really beautiful." Svetlana, who was almost impossible to be flustered, was suddenly stunned. Of course, it was not the first time she had been complimented on her beauty, and there had even been a few times when someone had awkwardly confessed their feelings to her. She was also not unaware of her appearance, and sometimes she liked to look at herself in the mirror, silently thanking her ancestors for giving her good genes. But this was the first time in her life that she had received a compliment about her attractiveness from a complete stranger. It sounded so serious, so mature, and so manly. There was genuine admiration in the boy's eyes. "I finally found you," Svetlana thought. "Thanks. But I still haven't decided whether to become an actor or a model," she laughed, trying to turn the conversation into a joke. But the boy was completely serious. "That's a great idea," he said. "With the way you look, you could definitely be a photo model." Svetlana felt his intense, appraising gaze, so serious and so mature. It made her feel uncomfortable, her face flushed with embarrassment. "Listen, I have to go. She glanced at her watch. Good luck, she said quickly and walked away. The conversation with this stranger, whose name she didn't even know, had left a deep impression on her. Sometimes she remembered the way his eyes shone when he looked at her, the genuine emotions he showed. Of course, she never admitted it to anyone. It was her secret, a secret she kept from the world. If her personality had been different, if she had been more selfish, or if she had been pampered, she might have become an arrogant person, using her beauty to manipulate people to her will. But Svetlana was an open and friendly person, and she never thought that her attractiveness gave her special privileges. Her family lived happily, and her mother, father, Svetlana, Igor, and Grandma Tonya often sat at the dinner table together, discussing what Svetlana would become after graduating from high school. "You're going to be an Olympic champion," Igor said dreamily. "Yes, that's right," her mother laughed coldly. "Svetlana can study law. It's a practical profession, always in demand. A good lawyer is always valuable, will never be unemployed." "Oh, stop it, Irina," her father protested. "Let such a beauty be buried in paperwork." "Enough, someone in the family has already buried herself in accounting books. Svetka, don't listen to anyone, become a model or an actress. You have a strong character, you can do it." "Oh, don't be delusional, dear son-in-law," Tonya complained, tapping her finger on Svetlana's father's forehead. "Don't you know how people get into modeling? Or should we send her straight to the red light district?" "What is the red light district, Grandma?" Igor asked curiously. "Is that a city? Where is it? Is it far?" "Don't listen to me, dear." It's not like that, she tried to explain. "But look, it's better to do something useful for people. Don't look for something easy, look for something meaningful." Grandma Svetlana firmly interrupted the heated argument. "I haven't decided anything yet." Her mind was a complete mess. Svetlana's vivid imagination and dreamy nature led her to frequently imagine herself as a famous supermodel, appearing on magazine covers all over the world, where people admired her beauty and grace. They called her a fashion icon, a trendsetter. But then she remembered that the life of a model came with strict restrictions and constant fasting, which she, who loved her grandmother's delicious pancakes and cheese, was completely against. Then she switched to imagining herself as an athlete, winning the occasional Olympic gold medal and dancing at the champion's ball with a handsome Australian spole. Swirly she'd had a crush on since 3rd grade. The handsome Australian would confess his love to Svetlana Vashenina, and she would reply in perfect English, making him her slave for the rest of his life. But then she realized that it was probably too late to start a sports career, and Svetka began imagining herself as a great actress, starring in blockbusters and winning all the prestigious awards. Then she switched to imagining herself as an athlete, winning the occasional Olympic gold medal and dancing at the champion's ball with a handsome Australian spole. Swirly she'd had a crush on since 3rd grade. The handsome Australian would confess his love to Svetlana Vashenina, and she would reply in perfect English, making him her slave for the rest of his life. But then she realized that it was probably too late to start a sports career, and Svetka began imagining herself as a great actress, starring in blockbusters and winning all the prestigious awards. International Film Awards, marrying a famous director, all these dreams once filled Svetlana's mind. She had plenty of fantasies, but no real thoughts about her future after graduation. "Mom, am I stupid?" she asked Irina's mother sadly. "Why can't I decide what I want to do?" "Don't worry, my dear," her mother reassured her with a gentle smile. "Everything will be fine. It means that the time for you to realize has not come yet, or you haven't heard the right hint. You will understand, and you won't make a mistake." And her mother was right. Life didn't just give hints, it also gave Svetlana a shocking decision that left her no choice. In the early spring of the year Svetlana was preparing for her graduation exams. A car skidded on the icy road, swerved into the opposite lane, and crashed head-on into a large truck. In that moment, Svetlana, who had the potential to become a supermodel, with a series of gold medals, and was sought after by famous directors around the world, became a lonely orphan girl with a little brother who didn't understand anything and an old, sad and depressed grandmother. She seemed to have lost both her past and her future, leaving only a present full of fear and uncertainty. After passing the graduation exam without much success, Svetlana sat down at the table, placed her newly received diploma, still smelling of ink, in front of her, and stared at it. A feeling of numbness, fatigue, and boredom suddenly invaded her. She just wanted to hide in a dark corner, close herself, cover her ears, close her eyes, and not move. "So, what are you doing here?" Grandmother Antonina's voice rang out behind her. She had just gotten out of bed, walked slowly and carefully into the kitchen, and sat down across from her granddaughter. "I'm thinking about how to go on living," Svetlana sighed. "Live normally, peacefully, and if possible, happily," the grandmother answered suddenly, her voice firm. "Normal? Peacefully? Happy?" Svetlana repeated in surprise, as if tasting the words and trying to understand whether they still fit in their home. "Yes, Svetlana," Happy Antonina said clearly. "We have to live, because there is no other life for you or for me. And there is no need to sit here and feel sorry for ourselves or for others. Sadness and pity only bring us down, do you understand? Sitting here and regretting is so easy and sweet, but getting up and doing is what must be done." The grandmother's voice grew stronger, and although she was still weak, she slammed her hand on the table as if to emphasize what she had just said. "Grandma," Svetlana sighed, "what can I do? Live normally, go to school, play volleyball like you hate, hang out with friends, work." "Yes, work, Svetlana. You have to work. Forgive me, I can take care of Igor, but I'm afraid I can't take care of both of you. You'll have to take care of yourself. Come on, Svetka, don't sit still. You've always been our active daughter, haven't you? Remember who you are. You're our Svetka, our little flame who never sits still, our beautiful girl." "My dear grandmother," Svetlana hugged her grandmother's thin shoulders and leaned her head against her. They sat there hugging, whispering sweet words to each other, until Igor returned from training, tired, hungry, and impatient as always. Then Svetlana decided to start a new life. She started working as a waitress in a restaurant and enrolled in courses. After finishing her studies, she would secretly clean the stairs in her apartment building late at night, doing this discreetly so as not to worry her grandmother. When she returned home late, she would often make excuses that she was busy with training or meeting friends. Her grandmother, though suspicious, would say nothing, just shaking her head helplessly. "Why do you have to do such work?" she would ask. "I'm trying to get a job. Maybe one day I'll become a craftsman and earn a steady income." "We need to live," Grandma Svetlana explained to her friend Alina, her best friend since school. "Let's save some money. Maybe later I can continue my studies." Life slowly returned to normal, as if it had always been that way, just the three of them. The old box that held their great-grandmother's hat was now filled with photographs, and none of them, not even Antina or Svetlana, dared to open it again. They were afraid that doing so would stir up memories of the dead. One day, Elena began the conversation in a hesitant tone. "Svetka, you're my best friend, right?" "Of course," Svetlana replied. "Then you have to support me. Can you go somewhere with me tomorrow morning? I'm a little scared to go alone, but with you, I won't be afraid anymore." What could be so scary? A dentist's office, an abandoned factory, or the Paris catacombs? Svetlana laughed, trying to reassure her. "If only it were that simple." Elena sighed. "I want to see a plastic surgeon." "Plastic surgery?" Svetlana exclaimed in surprise. "Yes," Elena said in a challenging voice. "You're fine, of course, but what about the others? Like me with this nose." She touched her slightly large nose, which she always felt was not suitable for her small face. "And don't try to stop me, okay? I've made up my mind. It's just that I'm scared to go alone. Will you come with me? I need you to be a model. I just have to point to you and tell the doctor I want to be like her. Who knows? Maybe a miracle will happen." She smiled, and they laughed together. On the appointed day, they went to the clinic together. Sitting in the small, cozy waiting room, Svetlana tried to cheer her friend up, her eyes covered by slightly darkened sunglasses. But that didn't stop her from feeling the man's intense, admiring gaze. A faint memory suddenly surfaced in her mind. She had definitely met this man somewhere before, but she couldn't remember exactly when or where. "Excuse me, but did we know each other?" she asked, trying to remember. "You certainly don't. We were so young." The man smiled. "Do you remember the neighborhood where we lived and studied? The old garages, a few brats, and a brave girl." "Oh, of course." Svetlana laughed as the memory flooded back. "You were the boy Vitya and his friends bullied, and I stood up for you." The man smiled back. "Yes, that was me." You left an indelible impression on me. Even though I was just a freshman and you were still in high school, I always thought about you, about how there were such beautiful girls in the world." He looked at her admiringly, while Svetlana tried to remember his name. "You must be trying to remember my name," he smiled. "No need to try." Dmitri lowered his head, gently kissed Svetlana's hand, and introduced himself. "My name is Dmitri. Nice to meet you again." Svetlana blushed and said, "It's a pleasure to meet you. It's strange that we're meeting like this. Usually people start talking to each other by calling each other you and he, and then switch to calling each other you and you. But with us, it's the opposite. When we were young, we talked very comfortably. Now we're so polite like this." Dmitri laughed loudly. "Yes, it's strange. But I hope I'll have the chance to switch back to being intimate with you." Dmitri's eyes were really captivating, making Svetlana embarrassed again. She tried to change the subject. "Are you working here?" "Actually, not really. I'm just starting out. I just graduated from college and I'm doing an internship here, mostly looking over legal documents," Dmitri explained. "Anyway, I wanted to ask you why you came here. With your appearance, there's no need for any work." Svetlana smiled, but when she saw that Dmitri was still holding her hand, she gently pulled it away. "I came here with you for moral support." "Thank God," Dmitri breathed a sigh of relief. "I thought you were crazy and wanted to change your perfect face." Svetlana laughed. "What are you talking about? I came here with friends, not for anything." Dmitri looked at Svetlana intently. Then suddenly, in an admiring but also serious tone, he said, "I used to think you would become a successful supermodel, but now you chose a different path, right?" Svetlana laughed loudly. "That's right. I decided to give up the halo of a supermodel to become a restaurant waitress." Dmitri looked at her intently, said nothing for a moment, then added regretfully, "So you're tired of restaurants? What a pity. I dreamed of inviting you to dinner. If you don't make me serve myself, I'll gladly accept your invitation," Svetlana replied with a laugh. And then she added, "Or rather, your invitation." The evening was wonderful, and Dmitri's eyes were still full of admiration, which made Svetlana even more radiant. When they parted at the door, Dmitri gently took her hand and whispered, "You know, it's dangerous to go to places like this with you. Men stare at you until their necks break. Some even get beaten up by their girlfriends because they keep staring at you." Svetlana giggled. "You're exaggerating." No, Dmitri continued, and then he gently lifted her hand and kissed it tenderly. "I think I've fallen in love with you. I really have. Actually, I've been in love with you for 5 years. I just didn't realize it. Now I'm sure." Dmitri took Svetlana home, but still didn't want to let go of her hand. Finally, as if gathering up all his courage, he approached her and gently, as if asking for permission, kissed her on the cheek. "Shall we meet again tomorrow?" he asked softly, and Svetlana smiled and nodded. Svetlana's grandmother stood in the doorway, watching her granddaughter with a bright smile on her face as she took off her coat and walked into the house. Dmitri smiled and hugged her gently. "Svetka, don't you think I'm a little bit underestimating myself? Do you think I only need a bride with a dowry and status? What about the fact that I love you madly?" Svetlana hesitated for a moment. Then she smiled. "Dima, I have nothing for you to rely on. I don't even have a stable job or a real career. So why do you want to marry me?" Dmitri gently stroked her hair, his eyes looking straight into hers with sincerity. "Svetka, don't you understand? I don't need anything else but you. I want you in my life, and everything else is secondary. I love you, and I want us to be together. That's all the reason I need." Svetlana still felt that there was something too sudden and unreal about what Dmitri said, but she couldn't help but feel his sincere affection. She smiled, her heart beating faster. "I don't know what to say, Dima. This is so unexpected for me. But I think we can try." Dmitri held her hand tightly and smiled brightly. "You won't regret it, Svetka. I promise." They hugged each other tightly, and Svetlana felt like she was entering a new chapter of her life, where all the hardships and pains of the past seemed to begin to fade away. Sometime later, Dmitri introduced Svetlana to his mother. At first, she felt nervous and uncertain, but Dmitri's mother, a gentle and delicate woman, quickly put her at ease. They chatted amicably, and Svetlana gradually felt that she could really become a part of this family. Everything seemed to be going smoothly, but in Svetlana's heart, there were still many thoughts intertwined about the big decisions in her life that she was preparing to make. However, She decided to believe in Dimitri's love and the good things that life could bring her. Dimitri continued to look deeply into Svetlana's eyes with sincerity. "And you never thought that I simply wanted to be with you all my life?" "Svetka, my dear," he said, his voice soft and full of affection. She felt her face flush with embarrassment. "Forgive me, dear Dimitri, I'm such a fool. I just can't believe anything, so I say stupid things to annoy myself. Will you forgive me, Dima?" Dimitri pretended to be serious, frowning and pretending to be annoyed. "I don't know, maybe I'll have to think about it," he said in a joking tone. "But okay, I've thought about it, and I forgive you. But I still don't understand. Will you marry me?" Of course I will." "Dima," Svetlana screamed and threw herself into his arms. "Then we'll go see your mother on Saturday," Dimitri concluded firmly. For the rest of the week, Svetlana was haunted by anxiety and anticipation, conjuring up in her mind the image of an elderly mother-in-law, a hulking figure with arms crossed over her chest, curly hair, heavily painted crimson lips, and a stern expression. She would ask Svetka, "Who do you think you are?" And then she would answer, "You're nothing. I knew it all along." Then she would conclude that Svetka was unfit to breathe the same air as her wonderful son, and throw her out of the house. By the end of the week, Svetlana was completely devastated by her fantasies. But after much coaxing and insisting that it was all nonsense, Dimitri finally persuaded her to get into the car. He took her hand and led her into the large, ancient house. Seeing the staircase, which looked like something out of a movie about pre-revolutionary Russia, where ladies in flowing dresses and gentlemen in tuxedos climbed wide stone steps before a ball, made her even more nervous. Finally, the large door opened, and Svetka stepped into the cool, slightly dark hallway. There was a large mirror that reflected her with clenched fists and wide eyes of fear. "I look like an idiot," she thought as she looked at herself in the mirror, trying to imagine what kind of impression she would make on the owner of this house. Absorbed in these thoughts, she did not immediately notice the small figure of a woman standing slightly to one side. "This is my mother," Anna Semyonovna, Dimitri introduced proudly. "Mom, this is Svetlana." Svetka looked at the woman and immediately felt the tension in her body melt away. Her shoulders relaxed and her nails no longer dug into her palms. Before her stood a young-looking woman, whose real age was hard to guess. Her shoulder-length hair was slightly curled, making her look even younger. She was wearing a white shirt and trousers that fit her slim figure. Anna Semyonovna tilted her head slightly and gave a small smile as she looked at her son and his daughter. "Hello, Svetlana. I'm glad I could make you feel comfortable," she said. "To be honest, I liked you at first sight, too." Svetka breathed a sigh of relief and shyly confessed, "I was very scared to meet you." Afterwards, they sat around the large round table in the cozy living room, drinking tea from delicate porcelain cups and chatting. Anna Semyonovna was an intelligent, refined, and very tactful woman. She listened well, and even when she didn't say anything, she naturally joined in the conversation, guiding it in the right direction. She knew about Svetka's sad story, but she never mentioned it directly, which kept the conversation light and cheerful. The girl felt as if she had been struck by a deep pain. This was the first time in her life that Svetlana had opened up about her family to a near stranger, with a gentle but warm smile. As they talked, Anna Semyonovna suddenly put her hand on Svetlana's hand that was on the table. Her dry and slightly cold hands reminded her of a long-forgotten feeling, as if her mother had done that. "You know, Dima," she said suddenly to her son, "could you please go to the store and buy us a bottle of white wine? Hurry up, Dima. I feel ashamed that we have nothing to drink to celebrate our meeting." Svetlana noticed something flash in Dima's eyes, perhaps a little anxiety, but maybe it was just her imagination. As Dima left the house, Anna Semyonovna looked intently at Svetlana. "You are very smart and kind, Svetoka. And you are very beautiful," she said unexpectedly. "You deserve a much better man than my son." These strange and unexpected words seemed to hang in the air. "I don't understand." Svetlana shook her head, trying to make sure she had not misheard. "What do you mean?" "I just want to warn you that Dima is not a prince from a fairy tale, quite the opposite. My son, how should I say this? In general, he is not a good person, Svetakaka. Moreover, he has a problem with alcohol, and that is why I do not keep alcohol in the house." Despite her efforts to remain calm, it was clear that these words were not easy for Anna Semyonovna. "What are you talking about, dear Anna Semyonovna? He is wonderful, kind and funny. You are mistaken. As for the wine, it is strange to me. We have been to restaurants and cafes many times, and he only drank a little. No, my daughter, I know what I'm saying, and I'm fully aware of what I'm saying. Believe me, it's not easy to say this about your only son. I just want to warn you, son. I just want you be careful. I wouldn't be able to forgive myself if something bad happened to you, and I wouldn't be able to forgive him either. I'm a normal mother. I love Dima, and I have no one else in the world but my son. I want him to be happy. She was silent again for a moment, then took Svetlana's hand, who was shocked. You're a wonderful girl. I didn't even expect that Dima could meet someone as wonderful as you. I'm so happy, really. This is such a blessing. She laughed loudly, happily, gently, like people who have suddenly been freed from a burden that has weighed them down for a long time. Svetlana and Dmitry later got married and moved into their own apartment. Over time, Svetlana noticed that Dmitry did indeed drink, but not as a regular drinker, did not cause trouble, did not shake his hands, and had never crossed the line where one begins to lose one's self-image. However, his habit of suddenly pouring himself a few sips of cognac, as he put it, to regain his energy made Svetlana uneasy. It is one thing for a person to enjoy a little of his favorite drink in the evening after a long day's work, to relieve stress and relax. But it is quite another when he grabs the bottle of wine nervously, as if his life depended on it, and drinks half a glass in one gulp in the middle of the day, and then calmly gets behind the wheel. Dima, what are you doing? Svetlana asked in surprise. Svetka, when this first happened, I was furious. I knew you were drinking, she shouted as they left the restaurant, where they had gone to celebrate the anniversary of one of their friends. Svetlana had clearly planned to leave the car in the parking lot and come back for it the next day. Come on, Svetik, don't be so difficult, Dmitry said, getting into the car. In the whole civilized world, a few sips don't count as drinking. Only in our place do we have such an exaggerated concern. Oh, look, there's a drunk driver. Oh, stop him, he's a criminal. Sit down, let's go. The chance of catching a cold standing here is higher than having an accident while driving. I only had a few glasses of wine. No, I won't get in the car, and you can't drive either. Dima, you know I'm afraid of accidents. My parents died in a car accident, Svetlana repeated. I remember, Svetka, I remember. Okay, sorry, he sighed, got out of the car and turned on the alarm. Let's go, you poor coward. This situation repeated itself from time to time, at least when they were together. When he was alone, Svetlana could only guess. In the evenings, when he returned home, she often noticed that he was a little drunk. What else do you want? Dmitry reacted angrily when she questioned his condition. I'm not a monk. I'm a lawyer. I have clients, and I don't need to explain everything to you. Enough. My mother drives me crazy every time I see her. However, despite all this, Svetlana was happy. She loved Dmitry and was grateful to him for his care and attention. She became a good hairdresser, and with experience she began to have regular customers and a decent income. Dmitry worked as a legal advisor. A year after the wedding, he suddenly started a strange conversation. Hey, Svetka, we need to think about how to live further, he said. What do you mean? She asked, surprised. Don't you understand? Dmitry said in a displeased tone. I mean, where are we going to live? I don't plan to spend my whole life in this shabby apartment. He pointed to the nearest wall. What do you mean shabby? This apartment is great. Svetlana was surprised. She really believed that the bright, comfortable two-room apartment that Dmitry's parents had given him a few years ago was a great place to live. Yes, great for a student, Dmitry quipped. But I'm a grown man. I want to live properly. We're already cramped. What if we have kids? We'll have to sit on top of each other. Dima, Svetlana exclaimed happily and hugged her husband. Do you really want kids? Wait, Dima gently but firmly removed her hand from his neck. Of course I want to have children, but I also want us to live in good conditions and not have to fight about the cramped and poor conditions right after the birth of Persian. But Dima, we don't have the money to buy a bigger apartment. We could borrow money, but that would mean we would have to pay interest for the rest of our lives. Thanks, but no thanks, she said sarcastically. He was silent for a moment and then looked straight at her. Svetka, do you really not understand, or are you pretending not to understand? he exclaimed. "My mother lives in a big apartment all by herself. Half of it belongs to me by all rights. Why should I be satisfied with the little I have when she should have given me the apartment? It's right and fair. Can you talk to her?" Dmitri frowned again, trying to maintain his composure. Men's talk he mimicked. But Svetlana laughed and asked men's talk. "What are you doing here? What do you have to do with men? And what kind of talk is this? 3 against 1. Is that how men behave in your opinion? I warn you for the last time, Svetka." "Go away," the leader of the small group almost pleaded. But when they saw Svetlana take off her backpack and stare curiously at them, they looked at each other hesitantly. After all, she was just a girl, tall, strong, and athletic, but still a girl and all alone, while there were 3 of them. It made them feel ashamed and afraid of their hesitation. It was unclear what would have happened if the black-haired boy in the torn shirt, whom everyone seemed to have forgotten, had not suddenly appeared beside Svetlana, standing shoulder to shoulder with her. The boy firmly brushed his hair from his face, clenched his fists, and looked straight into the faces of those who had insulted him. "The balance is even now," one of the men standing behind Victor whispered. "Let's leave. You know this girl. Getting involved with her will only hurt you. And do you hear? There's clearly someone in that garage." Victor was uncertain. He turned his head, trying to calculate whether retreating would reflect badly on his reputation. "Let's go. Get out of here," Svetlana added, sensing his hesitation. "You know, we're in the same school, and I don't need a gang to deal with you. You know that." Victor, clearly deciding that this wasn't worth pursuing, grimaced in disgust, spat on the ground, and muttered, "All right, live your life happily. As for you, Vershanina, I'll settle the score later." He waved his hand and walked slowly off with his friends. "You coward," Svetlana said contemptuously, then remembered that she was late for practice, quickly picked up her backpack and ran. "Thanks," she heard a small voice say. She stopped and turned back to look at the boy. Honestly, she had almost forgotten about him. Now she realized that the boy was much older than her, at least 2 years older, maybe more. "Thank you so much, you saved me," the boy said, then looked at Svetlana intently. "You're brave, especially for a girl." Oh, what bravery! Svetlana suddenly felt embarrassed, a feeling she was not used to. For whom? For those guys? They're cowards. The whole neighborhood knows it. They attacked you just because you're not a local. There's really nothing to say. How can there be nothing? There's so much to say. I don't even know what would have happened to me if it weren't for you. Honestly, I'm a little scared. It's not easy to face 3 people. Honestly, I've never been good at fighting, the boy smiled. Svetlana liked the way the boy admitted his weakness so frankly, without hiding or making excuses. "And one more thing," the boy continued. "I really wanted to tell you, Svetlana. You're really beautiful." Svetlana, who was almost impossible to be flustered, was suddenly stunned. Of course, it wasn't the first time she had been told she was beautiful. And there had even been a few times when someone had awkwardly confessed their feelings to her. She wasn't completely self-conscious about her appearance, and sometimes she liked to look at herself in the mirror, silently thanking her ancestors for giving her good genes. But this was the first time in her life that a complete stranger had complimented her on her attractiveness. Victor frowned again, trying to maintain his confident demeanor. Men's talk he mimicked, but Svetlana smiled faintly and asked back men's talk. "What are you doing here? What do you have to do with men? And what kind of talk is it that 3 people fight against 1? Is that how men behave, do you think?" In a daze, she tried to move but couldn't, then tried to open her eyes but couldn't. A feeling of fear overwhelmed her, but at that moment a cool, dry hand was placed on her closed eyelids. "Don't move, Stiftoka." "My dear," she heard a familiar voice. A few days later, she was finally able to peek through her lashes at the world around her. Next to the bed, in the soft light, sat Anna Semenovna. Svetlana had suffered several injuries, but the most serious was a broken femur. Even if she fully recovered, she would still limp. The head injury was not a cause for concern, but her facial skin was severely damaged and required stitches for many hours. A large piece of glass from the side window of the car had penetrated deep into her face, causing a laceration from her temple to her chin, fortunately not reaching her eye. A few months after being discharged from the hospital, Svetlana returned home, limping and with a large, ugly scar on her face, which had completely destroyed her self-confidence. Dmitri opened the door to their apartment, his face red and his head bowed. Then he stubbornly shook his head and looked straight at her. He himself, surprisingly, had suffered only minor injuries and a few bruises in the accident. "You're discharged. Come in," he said, while his hand fumbled with a button on his shirt that had almost come off. "Maybe it's a good thing." "That happened," he said, while Svetlana's eyes fell on a pair of women's shoes placed under a hanger. She smiled bitterly. "What's wrong with you?" "My dear, it seems you've been waiting for me," she said. He retreated into the kitchen, and Svetlana followed. In the kitchen, a pretty young woman was sitting, wearing a bathrobe and slippers. "Let me introduce you." Dmitri tried to sound confident and calm, but his hands were shaking, his lips were moving, and his eyes kept moving from one woman to the other. "My wife, Svetlana. And this is..." "I'm Alina," the woman said, clearly deciding to take the initiative. "I don't want to lie and say it's a pleasure to meet you." Svetlana smiled, staring at Dmitri, and continued, "We're all close friends now, right? We're loved ones, aren't we?" "What do you want?" Dmitri couldn't stand the tension anymore and finally blurted out, "I'm sorry that it happened like this." Svetlana smirked. "An accident, right? It's a pity, isn't it? Although perhaps I'm partly to blame. But what do you want from me now? I can't be with you anymore. I don't love you anymore, understand? How could I love you? I'm a healthy young man, and you now. Have you looked in the mirror?" he said, his face covered in sweat. She picked herself up and, quick as a flash, slapped him like a cat on its prey. "I saw you," she said, leaning back against the wall. "I saw you, darling. And where do you want me to go now?" "To my mother. She's been waiting for me, of course. You two can take care of each other. That'll help her in the meantime. And you can curse him with her every day. But remember, tell her that when it comes to Dad's apartment, I won't let it go. I'll get my share." "What part of him do you want me to claim?" Svetlana didn't listen anymore. She picked up her 2 suitcases full of things, walked to the door, stopped and looked back one last time. "I wish you two happiness," she said, trying to suppress her contemptuous smile. When she returned, Svetlana sat in the living room in front of Anna Semenovna, embarrassedly rubbing the scar on her face. The bandages were still on. How could I meet her with such a terrible face? "There's nothing terrible. Don't make up stories that aren't true." Anna firmly placed a cup of tea in front of Svetlana and gently removed her hand from her face. "Your grandmother and your brother have already talked it over. They both understand and really don't care what you do. As for staying here, you can stay as long as you like. This is your home. I've already made a will to leave it to you." Anna put her hand on Svetlana's shoulder to steady her. "I'm not saying this to make you worry or complain, but just to let you know. Besides, my time is running out. I'm sick and need my remaining days to be peaceful and quiet. Don't worry, I'm not doing this for nothing. I'll leave Dmitri to you if he's not damned. So if you don't agree to my terms, you can send me away right now." "Come on, don't cry, Svetlana. Please stop right now, okay?" "Svetlana, Stefkaka, my daughter." After they'd cried their hearts out, they sat hugging each other and looked out the window, where the crimson leaves were falling from the old maple tree. "You see, my child," Anna said, "in this world, everything needs a balance. If something wrong or unjust has happened because of your fault, then you must try to fix it. I am sorry for not being able to protect you. I understand that leaving this apartment cannot make up for your ruined life and damaged beauty, but this is the least I can do. Oh, and one more thing. I have a friend who is a wonderful plastic surgeon. I showed him pictures of you before and after the accident. He said it was his honorable duty to restore this beauty to the world, and I agree with him. So on Monday you will go to see him." 3 years later, Svetlana was squatting in front of the carefully tended grave, above which stood a tombstone with a portrait. "My grandmother has an anniversary today," she said. Although she said she didn't remember how old she was, it seems we're going to have a pretty big party. Kolya has already started talking, and Anika is raising him like a real big sister. Everything's fine, Anna Semenovna, don't worry. "Ah, well that's it, Svetlana, let's go," said the deep voice of a tall, broad-shouldered man standing next to her. "All right, Alyosha, I'll go now." Svetlana stood up and turned to look at her husband. She couldn't help but notice his usual admiring gaze. And how could it be otherwise when he was looking at a woman who exuded the timeless beauty of the Rostovs?